let's continue to talk about trade deadline here. And there's been a couple of names that we've talked about already. Matt Grzelcyk, we talked about Tuesday. Anthony Beauvillier, we've talked about a couple of times. But Blake Lizotte is another player that I'm keeping my eye on in the next 8 days. He started off red hot with the Pittsburgh Penguins, had 8 goals and 12 points in his first 20 games played. So a fourth liner on pace for 48 points. That's a red hot start for Blake Lizotte with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He has cooled off considerably, though. Only 1 goal in his last 21 games played with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, part of that is he's played primarily with Matt Nieto and Noel Acciari. That has been his line for most of his time with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And eventually, when you're playing with those two, your offensive numbers, they are going to suffer. So maybe he was a little out over his skis to start the season, and he's been a little held back here in the last portion of the season at the same time. So I look at him as somebody that would be very appealing around the National Hockey League. He has a movable contract because there's 1 year left at $1.85 million. So when somebody's buying that, they're not just buying a rental, they're buying a fourth line piece for their year this year and next year. He's 27 years old, which means he's in the prime of his career. He's a pretty good skater. And I think he is an upgrade for some of these contenders. I looked around a lot of these playoff teams in the East and the West. Tampa Bay looks like a good fit for Blake Lizotte. Colorado looks like a good fit for Blake Lizotte. Columbus looks like a good fit for Blake Lizotte. I don't know what's going on in New Jersey, but Eric Holla is their fourth line center right now, and he's having a horrendous season. So maybe they reach out and try to get Blake Lizotte onto their roster so they can go up against a really good Carolina Hurricanes bottom six, which is what it appears to be the first round matchup. It just feels to me that we haven't talked enough about Blake Lizotte simply because a lot of people think that the Penguins should hold on to him. And if they do, I'm not mad at all. I'm not advocating for him to get traded. I'm just saying going into the final 8-day stretch before the trade deadline, it makes a lot of sense that he is going to have some noise and some interest around him leading into the trade deadline.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think the LA Kings would take him back? I had the Kings roster up whenever you brought up the Erik Karlsson deal because I wanted to see what their defense looked like because they have a pretty stout defense most times, and Erik Karlsson needs a place he can go and play offense. Their current fourth line center is Trevor Lewis, who's 38. Has been around quite a bit. Maybe they don't want to replace the veteran down there. But you know, if you're looking for the youthful punch, I mean, Trevor Lewis only has 8 points this year, 4 goals, 4 assists. Maybe that's just an option they consider, bringing him back on the deal that he on his deal. It's just a name. It's just a name I threw out because if we're throwing out names, I was already on the Kings roster.
Yeah,
looked at it and went, you know what? There's the connection already there. The Kings look to be a really good team and might try and buy a little bit this time around. They also desperately need to beat the Oilers in the playoffs for once.
Yeah.
Not sure if, Blake Lizotte gives them over that hump, but it's a way to build, and I just haven't looked around at many other teams, and you never know. Would the Kings be interested in taking a player like him back?
Yeah, Trevor Lewis is on the last year of his contract making $800,000. So if you want to bolster that bottom six, if you want to give yourself another option going into a playoff series, it wouldn't be a bad pick for the LA Kings to say, hey, let's bring back Blake Lizotte. Now, I think they probably would have done so in free agency, especially considering Lizotte's contract wasn't all that expensive. But who knows? Maybe they look at this and say the grass wasn't greener on the other side. Let's bring back Blake Lizotte and see if it works in a second stint. It's not like NHL teams don't always do this. Hence the reason we're watching P.O. Joseph play on the first pairing next to Chris Letang. So I wouldn't rule it out. I'm just throwing out names of teams that I think that he would fit for, that he would be an improvement for. Did I say Columbus earlier as well? Ooh. I mean, you look at the Columbus Blue Jackets, I might have said it, but you look at the Columbus Blue Jackets, a team that right now is just flying by the seat of their pants, doing things that nobody expected them to do. I don't think they're going to want to put it all in for this year simply because they're a wild card team and it seems like they might be a little ahead of schedule. So you don't want to start trading first round picks, second round picks to bring in big names, but you do want to reward the guys that are there. And I think bringing in a Blake Lizotte, somebody who can kill penalties, somebody who does have that offensive touch. If you put him with somebody that has any offensive capabilities, sorry again to Noel Acciari, it's basically the skeleton of his past that's playing at this point. But there's no offense coming from Acciari. There's no offense coming from Matt Nieto. Boko Imama, what he does well, but what he does is not offense. So the Penguins' fourth line has never really given Blake Lizotte opportunities to score. And yet he still had that stretch of 20 games, which is a quarter of a season, where he was on pace for 48 points. So he has that in him. He's young. He has 1 year left on his deal. I think that's a move for a team like Columbus, a team like Detroit, although Detroit's depth looks pretty good at the center ice position, a team like Ottawa, if they truly believe this is the year that they need to punch back into the playoffs. Those are the teams that I'm looking at that should be the most interested in a Blake Lizotte, but he could also potentially be that missing piece in a bottom six for a true cup contender like a Tampa Bay, like a Colorado, like a New Jersey Devils.
Yeah, I like the Columbus option a lot because this team is so wild. Truthfully, how are they doing this?
Zach Werenski is an animal. That's how they're doing it.
Zach Werenski deserves the Norris this year.
Yeah, he'll get it.
Yeah,
he's scoring.
Yeah, that's a big piece of it. I mean, sure, their goaltending is still very questionable and might not be good in the playoffs. But, I mean, they've had an injury list matching your grocery list. It's been incredible what they've done this year. And their bottom six right now looks like it could use a punch of Blake Lizotte, even if whenever they get healthy, things kind of filter out. Blake Lizotte could still fill in on their bottom six somewhere. Their bottom two centers right now are Justin Danforth and Sean Corrali. Maybe someone bumps to a wing. Maybe someone moves around. Also, whoever the Penguins get in return in this sort of deal, who knows? I think the Columbus is also in that position because they're not necessarily trying to buy big. They know that they're kind of playing with house money, which is a great thing to play with, especially this time of year. But that doesn't mean you go all in and go for the Elias Petterssons, who's having a bad year anyway. Mm-hmm. You don't go for the biggest names on the trade market. You kind of go for those, well, the little guys that, you know, maybe they help us this year. Maybe they help us continue playing with house money. And going into next, if they build a better lineup and continue this trend, so, well, suddenly you still have Blake Lizotte with an extra year.
Yeah.
I think he fits in Columbus perfectly, now that you say that.
Yeah, you reward your team for playing well. And I think that's the position that the Columbus Blue Jackets are in, and not a position to go out and say, yeah, let's get Mikko Rantanen. Like that it doesn't fit Columbus. It doesn't fit, you know, maybe New Jersey. Nah, it doesn't fit New Jersey, but it doesn't fit like the Ottawas and the Detroits. Mm-hmm. But Blake Lizotte makes a lot of sense. Now, before we move on and talk about this weekend, let's wrap up our trade deadline discussion with this. I'm going to say a player name, a player that may be available for trade. You tell me yes or no. Are they going to be in trade talks in the next week? Michael Bunting.
No, I don't think. I think the Penguins like him too much still.
Rickard Rakell.
He will be, but he's not going until the summer.
Okay. Vincent Desharnais.
I forgot the Penguins had him. Doubtful. Again, look into the summer, maybe during next season. I don't know enough about him.
Any interest in Noel Acciari?
Kyle Dubas loves him so much. There should be
anybody else at this point.
Yeah, there should be interest because he can bring something specific.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, again, highly doubtful. Does he appear in talks or in rumors or in conversations? Unlikely.
And let's close it off with Alex Nedeljkovic.
Yeah, I could see that one popping up. I could see him or Jarry to a degree. Again, I know Jarry's in the A and is struggling.
Yeah.
But I'll stand by that if Edmonton, if that'd be the first place I think of, gets desperate for an option. He's won in that town before. It's closer to home. I could see Jarry being an option out in Edmonton. As for Nedeljkovic, yeah, I think so. The Penguins are in such a weird spot with goaltending. They have prospects ready to take the reins or at least take the next step. And who knows what's going on with Jarry.
Mm-hmm.
The goaltending is going to be interesting. I could see Nedeljkovic's name for the second straight year popping up in those conversations, even if he does have an extra year.
If Tristan Jarry is traded in the next 8 days, I'm going to be afraid of the other shoe to drop because Kyle Dubas is going to have to sell his soul to get another GM to eat that contract for him. We might have to give up one of the bridges in Pittsburgh, and it's not going to be one of the 420 that you haven't heard of. It's going to be like a Warhol or Clemente bridge that you're going to have to give up for Tristan Jarry to move. So I don't see another GM sitting there saying, yeah, let me take Tristan Jarry, because I think that's what we need as an organization, is to take on 3 more years of a goaltender who is now in his second stint at the American Hockey League levels.